Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I inherited 7 dusty acres in Nevada, I expected solitude and sunsets, not a luxury HOA pool squatting on my land. What started as a quiet off-grid dream exploded into a legal war of lies, fences, and forged documents. They built on my property. I built a reckoning. When I first rolled onto my newly inherited land in Washoe County, Nevada, I had 2 things on my mind: where to build my off-grid studio and how much beer I'd need to celebrate finally getting through probate court. 7 acres of dirt, brush, and stubborn family legacy. All mine now, thanks to my grandfather's will and 6 exhausting months of bureaucratic ping-pong. I'd seen the property before, but only briefly, back when it was still just the old pasture nobody wanted. I never expected to be welcomed with a goddamn resort next to the juniper trees. The south end of my property was supposed to be open. Instead, I found myself staring at a glimmering blue monstrosity of a pool. Olympic-sized, with polished stone decking, mounted lights, a matching cabana, and an actual sign reading, Silver Creek Ridge, HOA, private use only. No trespassing. There was even a freshly paved parking strip next to it, marked and painted like we were running a Four Seasons. I stood there next to my truck, mouth half open, wondering if I'd accidentally crossed into a country club by mistake. But nope. I pulled out the folded property map I'd kept in my glove box since closing. South fence line, still mine. Tree line just past the pump house, mine. Which meant that, unless someone had magically shifted county borders overnight, that pool was standing on my damn land. I snapped a few photos, drove the perimeter slowly, and went back to Reno that night, pissed off enough to skip dinner. The next morning, I booked a licensed surveyor. A guy named Mitchell came out 2 days later, set up his tripod, and started scanning with all the calm detachment of someone used to settling fence disputes between rednecks with shotguns. After 4 hours of measurements, Mitchell gave me a folder with certified documentation and a quiet chuckle. 62% of that pool, filtration systems included, is on your parcel. They even drilled 2 utility lines straight through your southern lot. You got yourself a hell of a trespass case. I thanked him, tipped him generously, and emailed scanned copies of everything to my lawyer in Carson City, just to keep things neat. But I wasn't looking to start a war. Not yet. I drafted a simple professional letter addressed to the Silver Creek Ridge Homeowners Association and sent it certified mail. In it, I offered 3 options: remove the structure, negotiate a lease, or buy the portion of the land they were occupying. It was polite, generous even. Frankly, I would have been happy with a modest rent and a non-aggression pact. A week passed. No answer. Then came the email, not even from a lawyer, from Karen Montgomery herself, president of the HOA, attached to an HOA stamped PDF titled Cease and Desist, Unlawful Harassment and Land Use Threat. According to her, my land was community borderland with unclear historic ownership, and my letter constituted an attempt to blackmail a non-profit entity. I had to reread it 3 times. She actually accused me of extortion for asking about my own land. Karen had included a beautifully condescending closing paragraph, too. Please refrain from future contact unless via HOA counsel. Any physical modifications made near the pool area will be considered vandalism. Our board has documented GPS coordinates supporting our site usage and will not tolerate threats to community enjoyment. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. That afternoon, I stood on the edge of the pool, GPS map in one hand and Karen's ridiculous letter in the other, staring at the neat little cabana they'd built half on my soil. A jogger from the HOA stopped to glare at me like I was casing the place. No problem, I thought. You want boundaries? Let's talk about real legal ones. The next morning, I ordered coffee, opened my laptop, and filed for a temporary injunction through the county court system. I wasn't screwing around anymore. Karen wanted to play HOA Queen of the Desert. Fine, let her try it in front of a judge. While the motion was processing, I hired a fencing company out of Sparks. No cheap chain link nonsense. I wanted something clean, legal, and unmistakably not a suggestion. They quoted me just under $11,000 for a powder-coated steel privacy barrier that would follow the southern boundary line to the inch. I gave them a go. 2 days later, 3 guys in work trucks pulled up and started marking the posts. Karen must have seen them from her HOA lair because by mid-morning she was already storming toward us across the lot like an offended ostrich in yoga pants. "Excuse me," she barked, waving her phone like a weapon. "This is unauthorized construction. You cannot do this." I calmly handed her the boundary survey and county parcel map. "This is my property, Ms. Montgomery. You're currently standing 3 feet inside of it." She snatched the paper like it burned her and started snapping photos. "This fence is obstructing community resources. You are committing criminal interference." The fence crew kept working. I had already filed the notice of intent, and the project was fully permitted. I didn't owe her an explanation, let alone permission. Then she pulled her trump card. "I'm calling the sheriff," she snapped. "We'll see what they have to say." 30 minutes later, a patrol SUV from Washoe County arrived. Out stepped 2 deputies. The older one adjusted his belt and gave me a nod. His name tag read Lean McKinney. "What seems to be the issue here?" Before I could speak, Karen shoved her phone into his face. "This man is illegally fencing off public space and cutting access to our HOA pool." Lieutenant McKinney calmly turned to me. "You got paperwork for the fence, sir?" I handed him the permit, deed, and survey folder Mitchell had provided. He flipped through them with a slow, practiced eye. Then he looked up. Deadpan. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Karen, "you do realize this fence is on his property, right?" Karen blinked. "That's disputed land. The HOA has long-standing usage rights. This pool has been here for nearly a year." He held up the deed. "Doesn't matter. The survey is certified, the permit's valid, and this man owns this land. That means he can fence it, post it, or turn it into a cactus maze if he wants. You're lucky he's not charging for foot traffic." The younger deputy actually chuckled. Karen flushed bright red, spinning back toward me. "This is harassment. You're doing this to antagonize us." "No," I said, folding my arms. "I'm doing this to keep strangers from swimming 6 feet from my workshop foundation." By late afternoon, the crew had finished half the perimeter, including the part that neatly cut through the deep end of the pool, separating it from the parking lot and the cabana. They used construction fabric along the panels so no one could just hop the line. I posted signs every 20 feet. "Private property, do not enter. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Over the next 2 days, I received 3 HOA emails, 1 letter from their attorney, more bluff than teeth, and a handwritten note taped to my truck windshield that said, "This will ruin lives. Hope you're proud." No signature, just red ink in aggressive cursive. Creepy. But the best part? That Saturday morning, 2 teenage lifeguards from the HOA showed up and stood in front of the locked gate, clearly confused that the pump house and shower area were inaccessible. One tried to reach the filter valve, realized it was inside my fence, and just stared through the metal like a sad zoo visitor. That same evening, I got a voicemail from Karen. Her tone was no longer smug. It was pissed. "You've made your point. Now take down the fence before someone gets hurt." I didn't reply. I was already preparing the civil complaint for damages and unlawful occupation. If they wanted to escalate, I was ready to bring artillery. The summons came on a Wednesday morning, hand-delivered by a very apologetic-looking process server who seemed embarrassed to be standing in my gravel driveway. I signed without comment and took the envelope inside. As expected, the HOA was suing me. Karen's masterpiece of a complaint accused me of malicious obstruction of community infrastructure, intentional emotional distress, and, my favorite, destruction of communal harmony. She also alleged that I had fabricated property lines using private consultants and manipulated legal loopholes to assert dominion over shared space. Someone had clearly bought a thesaurus and used it like a hammer. The best part? Attached to the complaint was a scanned letter, supposedly written by my grandfather, dated 8 years prior, allegedly stating that he wished for the neighborhood to benefit from the southern parcel as a gesture of goodwill. The signature looked passable, but the letterhead was anachronistic. My grandfather, a man who wrote on a typewriter until the day he died, didn't use Microsoft Word templates with digital watermarks. I forwarded the document to my lawyer, Jen. 2 days later, she confirmed what I already suspected. The signature was forged. The document metadata indicated it was created just 5 months ago, and the style matched HOA documents issued by Karen herself. The phrase gesture of goodwill, Jen noted, appeared verbatim in 5 other HOA letters from the past year. She was practically giddy. "It's like they didn't even try to cover their tracks," she said. They handed us a fraud charge on a silver platter. We filed a counterclaim immediately: trespass, fraudulent occupation, attempted forgery, and a formal request for an injunction against the continued use of the pool. Jen also submitted a motion to compel a site inspection and technical review of the HOA's permitting documents. That turned out to be the next crack in their crumbling little kingdom. Because when the county building office responded, they included copies of the original construction permit for the pool. That's when we discovered something delicious. The permit application was submitted using coordinates that didn't include the southern 50 feet of the property. In other words, the HOA had received permission to build a pool entirely on their own land, but then built half of it over mine. We subpoenaed the construction plans, which showed the pool design stopping 20 feet short of my property. Somewhere between paper and concrete, they decided to expand the footprint, probably assuming nobody would notice or care. Classic HOA logic. If it's shiny and has landscaping, it must be legal. Jen called it trespass by convenience. I called the county inspector's office and asked to speak with whoever signed off on the pool finalization. A nervous man named Kurt admitted over the phone that he relied on documents provided by the applicant and didn't personally verify the boundaries. We requested a formal interview and added building department negligence to our report for the court. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't taking any of this well. She sent out a community newsletter to HOA members claiming I was a rogue squatter with political connections, trying to extort a peaceful neighborhood through legal gamesmanship. She also launched a petition to have land borders redrawn in the interest of unity. It got 16 signatures, 8 of which were from her own family, including her cat's vet and a guy named Doug, uncertain. In court, their attorney tried to suppress the forgery evidence, claiming it was irrelevant to current use. Jen tore them apart with a single sentence. The entire defense rests on a fake document. Everything else collapses when that's removed. The judge set a hearing to review the forgery claim and temporarily barred HOA from using the pool until resolution. That meant no events, no swimming, no water maintenance. By the end of the week, the pool pumps were silent. The water started turning green, and I was just getting warmed up. Saturday arrived with a sense of uneasy quiet. The air was still, the sky was scorched blue, and the HOA pool, now officially sealed off by court order, sat motionless behind my fence, the water turning that perfect shade of algae soup. I was sipping coffee from the deck of my trailer, halfway through drafting a proposal to turn the space into a rentable event lawn, when I heard distant music. Loud, poppy, suspiciously festive. I walked toward the property line and saw what could only be described as a full-blown HOA party in progress. Balloon arches lined the street. Kids ran barefoot with paper flags, and a table with a massive sheet cake read, Silver Creek Summer Splash. That wouldn't have been a problem, except they had somehow moved the barricades and propped open the pedestrian gate I had locked shut too. Days prior, a literal crowd of homeowners in swimsuits were lounging poolside, margaritas in hand. Karen was front and center wearing a sun hat the size of a satellite dish, shouting instructions through a megaphone like a cruise director. I stood there stunned. Either she had a death wish, or she believed her HOA bylaws superseded a Nevada court order. I grabbed my phone, walked down the path, and started filming. Karen spotted me and immediately strutted over, barefoot, her drink sloshing dangerously. "You're not allowed to film people on HOA property," she shrieked. I turned the camera directly to her. "This isn't HOA property. This is my land, and this pool is shut down by court order." She waved a sweaty hand in the air. "It's a community morale event. We're allowed to gather peacefully. You can't stop neighbors from enjoying the weekend." "Karen," I said calmly, "you are violating a court injunction. That's not a weekend. That's a criminal charge." She scoffed. "You wouldn't dare call the cops again. It'll look petty. Everyone's watching." I did it anyway. I called the sheriff's office while she was still standing there. "I need a deputy out at the Silver Creek Ridge HOA, I said, loud enough for the group to hear. "There's a group trespassing on enjoined property in violation of a court order." The music stopped about 15 minutes later, just as 2 sheriff's vehicles rolled in. Deputies stepped out and immediately recognized the setup for what it was: an HOA organized event held illegally on private land that was explicitly off limits. Lieutenant McKinney was back. He walked straight up to Karen, still holding her margarita. "Ma'am, do you recall our last conversation about the property line?" Karen looked around, trying to summon backup, but the party crowd had already started dissipating. Someone unplugged the speakers. A man wearing pool floaties slinked into his Tesla and left without saying a word. "I'm going to need you to step aside," McKinney said. "You're being detained for disobeying a court order and violating private property boundaries." "You're arresting me?" she gasped. "For a party. For criminal contempt," he said, cuffing her hands behind her back with the smooth finality of a man who'd done this many times before. "And for ignoring an injunction that you were personally served with." Karen shouted something about her rights and HOA sovereignty as they escorted her to the back of the cruiser. The other deputy took statements from me, from a few embarrassed guests, and from the pool lifeguard, who apparently had no idea there even was a legal dispute. The party was over, quite literally. The sheriff's office posted an official no-entry notice on the cabana door, complete with county seal. The pool was now sealed under authority of the court, and the filtration system, which sat entirely on my side, was ordered disabled until further notice. By evening, the only sound near the pool was the faint gurgle of stagnating water. The HOA board sent out a blast email that night, claiming the event had been unofficial and that Karen had acted without board approval. Judging by the muted tone of the message, I figured her position was starting to look tenuous. And all I'd done was let her dig her own chlorinated grave. By Monday morning, the story had gone public. It started small, just a paragraph in the Washoe County Tribune's Community Briefs column. HOA president detained over disputed pool built on private land. But within 24 hours, a local reporter named Elise Grant had dug deeper. Her full feature hit the web Tuesday evening under the headline, "Power, Pools, and Property Lines, the Battle for Silver Creek Ridge." It quoted court documents, included aerial photos from my property survey, and even captured a shot of Karen being loaded into the sheriff's cruiser, half smile, half snarl, in full sun hat glory. HOA members began knocking on my door, not in anger, but with awkward apologies and nervous questions like, "So, is it true we were swimming on your land this whole time?" The fallout didn't stop there. The county building inspection team, apparently spurred into action by Elise's article, sent 2 code enforcement officers to evaluate the pool site. They arrived in a nondescript SUV and spent 4 hours combing through every inch of the installation. Their preliminary report landed in my inbox that evening. Highlights included: the pump housing violated clearance regulations. The chlorination system lacked a secondary containment feature. The emergency exit path from the pool area crossed directly into an unpermitted access route on my land. And most critically, the entire construction had been finalized without proper final inspection. Apparently, Karen had never called for a closeout review, probably assuming nobody would ever question her perfectionist fantasy spa. I forwarded the report to Jen, who nearly cackled through the phone. "This isn't just civil trespass anymore. It's regulatory negligence. You've got the building department's own words now. HOA's insurance is going to have a stroke." The next domino fell at the HOA's emergency board meeting that Friday night. I didn't attend, I wasn't invited, but I had a perfect view of their clubhouse from my ridgeline. Cars arrived slowly and the meeting ran long. Voices were raised. People left early. According to a leaked email that hit the Silver Creek Facebook group the next morning, 3 board members resigned, citing irreconcilable ethical concerns, and Karen was placed on temporary administrative leave pending a full review. Translation: they threw her under the bus to avoid being flattened with her. Meanwhile, I received a letter from a nervous-sounding HOA secretary requesting a meeting to discuss potential mutual resolution. Jen drafted a brutally formal reply: "Our client has already made clear his willingness to discuss terms months ago. Your association chose to ignore, escalate, and then fabricate. Resolution is no longer mutual. It is legal, and it is in progress." While Jen turned the screws, I received a surprise visit from a county assessor. He wanted access to the site to complete a reappraisal, not of my land, but of the entire pool and structures now deemed encroaching improvements. Any permanent structure on your parcel that's not permitted by the owner becomes part of the property value for tax purposes, he explained. "So let me get this straight," I asked. "They built a luxury pool on my land, and now I own a luxury pool?" "Unless the court orders removal," he said, smiling. "It's yours." I stood there, staring at the shimmering blue disaster behind the fence, and realized I had just become the proud owner of a very expensive, very illegal HOA spa. Not bad for a pasture nobody wanted. The courthouse smelled like old paper, cheap coffee, and anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table wearing the only suit I owned, charcoal gray, barely worn since my cousin's wedding, while Jen flipped through a binder like she was preparing to cross-examine a war criminal. Across from us, the HOA's legal team looked like they'd walked straight out of a suburban insurance commercial, polished, tense, and about 5 degrees too smug. Karen wasn't present. She was still out on bail after her contempt arrest, though her name was all over the defense filings, and not in flattering ways. The judge, a wiry man in his 60s named Franklin Helms, opened with his usual raspy bark. "Let's keep this moving. I've got a probate hearing at 3, and I don't want to miss lunch." Our first move was clean and surgical. Jen introduced the forgery evidence, complete with a forensic report on the grandfather's letter. The judge barely let the HOA lawyer finish, objecting before holding up the report. "This document is fake," he said flatly, "and central to your client's claim of historical consent." "That's not a good start, counselor." Next came the surveyor, Mitchell, who took the stand like a man who had measured 1,000 lines and suffered 1,000 land disputes. He presented maps, aerials, elevation diagrams, even timestamps from his drone survey. No drama, just facts. 62% of the structure, including filtration, decking, and underground plumbing, is within the plaintiff's parcel, as recorded in the updated county plat from last year, he said plainly. The defense tried to argue that the HOA reasonably believed they were within their boundary due to historical use and prior layouts. Jen rose so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. "Your Honor, the only layout they consulted was a fantasy sketch signed by someone's dead dog. They expanded the project after submitting plans for a smaller footprint and never filed an amendment." Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Jen called the county permit officer, Kurt, to testify. The same nervous man I had spoken to on the phone. Under oath, he explained how the HOA had submitted approximate site boundaries, but he had assumed they were using a recent survey. "Did they include a certified boundary survey with their application?" Jen asked. "No," Kurt admitted, fidgeting. "I requested one, but the applicant said they were working off internal HOA maps." Jen pounced. "So the county approved construction based on documents not verified by any neutral party?" Kurt swallowed. "That's correct." "Thank you," she said, turning to the judge. "That's gross negligence by the applicant, and further confirmation that this structure was placed based on deliberate misrepresentation." The judge asked one final question. Was there any attempt by the HOA to update the permit once they expanded construction beyond the approved design? "No, Your Honor," Kurt said. Boom. Done. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge leaned back in his chair, let out a long breath, and muttered, "Jesus." He tapped his gavel once and said, "Court will reconvene tomorrow morning for final review and ruling. I've heard enough for today." As we stepped out into the bright Nevada sun, HOA board members rushed to huddle with their counsel. One woman with a binder full of minutes looked like she was about to cry. A tall man I recognized as the treasurer cursed under his breath and stormed off. The house of cards was swaying. Jen walked beside me, grinning like a wolf in court-approved heels. "That," she said, "was fun." I nodded. "It's not over yet." She smiled wider. "No, but it will be." The morning of the final hearing, I dressed like I was showing up for a job interview I already knew I'd win. Button-down shirt, no tie, folder under my arm. Jen insisted on coming with me, said she wouldn't miss it for anything. We parked across from the courthouse in downtown Reno and walked in through the front steps like we owned the place. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. A couple of reporters I recognized from earlier hearings were already setting up. A small knot of HOA members sat stiffly in the back row, whispering to each other. Karen was there too, in a navy blue blazer so pressed it looked like it had been ironed by litigation itself. Her hair was tightly pinned back, and her expression was a mask of forced calm. Her lawyer, the fourth one she'd hired since this began, stood beside her, flipping through a stack of printed exhibits like it would somehow save them. Judge Helms entered right on time. No small talk, no warm-up. "We're reconvening for Hale versus Silver Creek Ridge HOA," he began. "All evidence has been submitted, and after reviewing the case file thoroughly, I am prepared to deliver a ruling." My chest tightened just slightly. I didn't expect to lose. The facts were on my side. But courts can be funny things. Still, the judge's tone wasn't one of uncertainty. He laid out the facts systematically and with finality. The HOA had built a multi-use recreational pool facility without securing final permits from the Washoe County Building Division. The GPS coordinates tied to the submitted construction documents did not match actual property lines, and the pool encroached over 60% onto private land, my land. The HOA had intentionally bypassed notification requirements during my estate's probate period, exploiting the administrative limbo. The letter claiming to be from my grandfather was fraudulent, confirmed by handwriting experts and the metadata on the scanned PDF they submitted. Karen Montgomery was personally involved in every one of those steps. Karen's lawyer tried to interject. Judge Helms raised a hand. "You'll remain silent until the conclusion of my statement." I glanced at Karen. Her hands were folded in her lap, white-knuckled, and for the first time, she looked like someone who realized the game was over. Furthermore, Helms continued, the HOA's decision to hold a public event on disputed land after being issued a preliminary injunction is not only a direct violation of this court's order, but an act of civil contempt. Dead silence in the room. As such, he said, now looking directly at me, this court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Brandon Hale. He began reading the verdict like he was chiseling it into stone. The HOA is to pay $370,000 in damages, including land use trespass, structural encroachment, emotional harm, and all associated legal fees. The recreational facility known as the Silver Creek Pool shall be transferred to the plaintiff as personal property. The HOA is further ordered to dismantle all additions and structures located on their remaining portion, including the parking lot, lighting systems, signage, and plumbing running across the border. Karen Montgomery is sentenced to 18 months probation plus 150 hours of community service for forging legal documents, perjury, and contempt of court. There was a brief rustle of paper from the gallery, a few gasps. I caught a flash from a local reporter's phone as she typed rapidly. Karen sat frozen, her mouth a thin line, blinking rapidly as if she couldn't process what she'd just heard. The judge closed the folder. This case is now concluded. I nodded, not smiling, just acknowledging the moment. Thank you, Your Honor. As I walked out with Jen, the courthouse doors opened into bright sunlight. Reporters were waiting, but I didn't give them a speech. Just one sentence. Silver Creek built a pool on my land. The court just helped me draw the boundary permanently. Jen grinned. That line's going to be a headline. 2 weeks later, I sat on the edge of the pool with my feet in the water, not swimming, just watching the sunlight ripple across a place that had once been the HOA's dream project and was now entirely, irrevocably mine. The last of the HOA's construction was gone. Their crew, supervised by county inspectors, had dismantled the ugly parking lot, torn down the steel entry gate, and removed the floodlights they had bolted into oak trees on both sides of the fence. The property line had been remarked with bright orange stakes and official Washoe County boundary flags, just to make sure no one forgot where things stood. Literally. I had my own team build a proper permanent fence around the pool, a clean black metal structure with keypad access. Motion sensors, cameras, and clear signage were installed at every possible entry point. And just above the new double gate, I added a custom-made sign in matte steel letters. Not built with my money. Still mine. It felt better than any trophy. Karen didn't make any public appearances after the ruling. But someone forwarded me a blog post from a local community gossip site. There she was, in a neon vest with a trash bag in one hand, picking up soda cans along Route 395 as part of her court-ordered community service. The post was titled, "From HOA Queen to Roadside Janitor, The Fall of Karen Montgomery." I saved a screenshot for personal morale purposes. I thought about just filling in the pool with gravel and concrete, turn it into a giant parking slab. But I knew that would only waste its potential, and Karen would probably love the symbolism. No, I had a better idea. Over the next month, I filed paperwork, got the zoning adjusted, applied for a small business license, and built out what was now listed officially as a private wellness venue. The locker rooms were renovated with cedar benches and new tile. I added a dry sauna, built a shaded relaxation pavilion, upgraded the filtration system, and landscaped the surrounding area with native plants and low-voltage garden lighting. The new name was laser cut onto a stone sign out front. Pasture Springs, private spa and retreat, exclusive, by invitation only. No walk-ins. And very clearly, not for HOA members. I launched a website. The first week, we booked 4 small groups, a women's hiking club from Truckee, a bachelor party from Reno, and 2 private events from a local event planner. Guests paid well. They left glowing reviews. One even asked if she could rent it for recurring yoga retreats. Meanwhile, word spread like wildfire across Silver Creek Ridge. Former board members tried to sneak in. One used a friend's name to book. Another offered my assistant a $500 tip to bend the rules. It didn't work. And when someone spray-painted community property on my outer fence, I sent the footage to the sheriff. They called it criminal mischief. Karen was fined another $1,000, and this time the court added willful defiance of judgment to her record. I installed more lights. Now, each morning I wake up, grab coffee, and walk out to a place that was once a line in the sand and is now a sanctuary. I hear guests laugh, water splashing, birdsong blending with music from the pavilion speakers. The land that was once dismissed as an unused strip had become a retreat, and every time I walk past the pool gate, I pat that metal sign. Thanks for the spa, Karen. Really?